They told you democracy was a choice, a voice, a freedom, a ritual where every citizen becomes a ruler for a moment. But that was the first illusion, because the truth is far more uncomfortable. People do not vote with reason. People vote with emotion. And emotion is the easiest thing in the world to weaponize. If you've ever wondered why societies collapse, why crowds lose their minds, why nations choose leaders who promise storms instead of stability, it begins here in the empire of emotion. Before we go deeper, answer this honestly, not to me, but to yourself. Have you ever voted because you were afraid, angry, hopeful, tired? Have you ever chosen a side because it made you feel something, not because you understood it? If your answer is yes, you're human. And that's exactly why you are useful to the people who hold power. Emotion is not a weakness. Emotion is a doorway. And every powerful leader knows how to walk through it. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote that humans are predictable, not through logic, but through longing, fear, love, pride, safety, identity. These are not political forces. These are primal forces. And primal forces turn crowds into weapons. Think about the last time you saw a political movement explode. The banners, the chants, the tears, the rage, the hope. Did you see a collection of individuals? Or did you see a single organism breathing with one enormous collective emotion? That is the moment a crowd stops thinking and starts obeying. Not because they are stupid, but because emotion collapses complexity. It simplifies the unbearable weight of thinking into something the heart can carry. And here is the darker truth. Powerful people know that emotional crowds are easier to guide than rational individuals. It's the difference between steering a river and steering a single drop of water. A drop resists. A river obeys. Maybe that's why politicians never speak to your intelligence. They speak to your insecurities, your wounds, your hunger for belonging, your desperation for meaning. Because emotional voters don't need facts. They need stories, symbols, villains, saviors. And every time you react instead of reflect, your emotion becomes ammunition. Ask yourself this. Why do political speeches sound like sermons? Why do leaders repeat the same lines? Why do campaigns focus on fear more than policy? Why does every candidate present themselves as the only hope and every opponent as the only threat? Because emotion wins faster than reason. Emotion spreads faster than logic. Emotion survives longer than truth. You already know this, even if you've never said it aloud. Think of any election, any protest, any political crisis. Logic is present at the beginning, but emotion carries the end. And here comes the quiet whisper. Machiavelli left behind. The ruler who controls emotion controls the people, and the people who cannot control their own emotions become the ruler's perfect weapons. Let me ask you something else, and I want you to answer it in the comments so others can see they're not alone. Have you ever looked back at a political moment and wondered, what was I thinking? Or why was everyone so emotional? Or how did that movement get so big so fast? Your memory is not lying. You are caught in a current, an emotional river designed to move bodies faster than minds. Some people call this manipulation. Some call it strategy. Machiavelli called it necessity, because if a leader does not control the emotional climate, someone else will. And here's the part no one dares to admit. Most citizens don't want truth. Truth is slow. Truth is heavy. Truth is uncertain. Emotion is quick. Emotion is simple. Emotion is addictive. That is why the empire of emotion rules democracy. Not the Constitution. Not the institutions. Not the people. Emotion. And whether you like it or not, that empire governs you too. In this documentary, we will walk into the shadows behind that empire. We will examine how emotional voters are shaped, sharpened, and mobilized. And by the end, you will see what most citizens never recognize. Those who control emotion control the nation. If you're still here, take a breath. You've already crossed the line where most people turn back. This is the beginning. You've heard the phrase, people vote with their hearts. But that is too soft, too innocent, too clean. The truth is far more calculated. People vote with their wounds, with their fears, with their insecurities, with the parts of themselves they never admit exist. The emotional voter is not born. The emotional voter is engineered. And once you understand how that engineering works, you stop seeing citizens and start seeing instruments. Let me ask you something simple, something personal. What emotion drives your decisions the most? Fear? Anger? Hope? Pride? Comment it below. You'll be shocked how many share your answer, because the architects of modern politics already know. Fear-based voters behave in patterns. Anger-based voters behave in rhythms. Hope-based voters behave in waves. Identity-based voters behave in tribes. And when a politician looks at a crowd, they don't see diversity. They see categories, triggers, emotional entry points. This is the revelation most people never reach. Your emotion is a political asset, a resource, a fuel source for someone else's strategy. Take fear. Fear is the strongest mobilizing force in human psychology. It bypasses rational thought. It collapses options into two choices: fight or flee. A politician who controls fear controls urgency, controls turnout, controls loyalty. If you tell a crowd everything is fine, they relax. Relaxed crowds don't vote. But if you whisper, someone is coming for your future, your family, your identity, the relaxed crowd becomes a marching army. Fear wakes the sleeping giant. And once awakened, it does not question. It obeys. Now look at anger. Anger is the emotion that dissolves nuance. It turns complex issues into simple targets. It transforms political opponents into enemies. A politician who controls anger doesn't need to offer solutions. He only needs to point a finger, name a villain, draw a line in the sand, and the emotional voter will cross that line without thinking, without checking, without blinking. Then there is hope. Hope is the sweetest illusion ever created. Because hope feels noble. Hope feels intelligent. Hope feels moral. But hope is still an emotion. And an emotional voter driven by hope will forgive every failure as long as the story still feels inspiring. The people don't need results. They need the sensation of possibility. That is why political speeches are drenched in promises and almost empty of details. Details activate logic. Promises activate hope. And hope turns crowds into believers. Then comes identity, the most powerful emotion of all. Identity is the story you tell yourself about yourself. Who you believe you are, what you stand for, where you belong. When a politician speaks to identity, he is not speaking to your mind. He is speaking to your core. Tell a crowd, you are good people. You are the backbone of this nation. You have been ignored. You deserve power. They will follow you anywhere, not because they trust you, but because you reflected back to them a version of themselves they desperately want to believe is true. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology was a science. He wrote that people are motivated not by truth, but by the appearance of truth. Not by justice, but by the feeling of justice. Not by power, but by the illusion that they share in it. And that illusion is enough to mobilize millions. Think about this. When was the last time you researched a policy deeply? When was the last time you read the full document behind a political claim? When was the last time you verified a statistic instead of accepting the version that matched your emotions. Be honest, most people never do. Because politics doesn't ask for thought. Politics asks for feeling. And feelings are faster. A logical argument takes minutes. An emotional trigger takes seconds. But here is the twist that turns this from psychology into weaponry. When you gather enough emotional voters together, you no longer have a group. You have momentum. And momentum is the deadliest force in politics. Momentum doesn't question. Momentum doesn't pause. Momentum crushes anything that stands in its way. That is why emotional voters become the perfect weapons, because they act quickly, they act loudly, they act collectively, and most importantly, they believe they are acting freely. The perfect weapon is the weapon that does not know it's being used. This is why political strategists study emotion more than policy. Why campaign teams have psychologists, behavioral scientists, social engineers. Why speeches are tested, phrases are manufactured, narratives are polished to hit the emotional center of the masses. You are never the audience. You are always the instrument. But here's the part you need to remember. Once you see this machinery, you can never unsee it. And once you stop reacting emotionally, you stop being useful to those who rely on emotional voters to maintain their power. Before we move on, answer this in the comments. Which emotion do you now suspect has controlled you the most? Fear? Hope? Anger? Identity? Your answer will reveal more than you realize. There is a dangerous illusion people cling to, the belief that obedience is a conscious choice. That submission is something they decide to give. That loyalty is a rational conclusion. But Machiavelli saw what most miss. Obedience is not chosen. It is triggered. It is engineered. It is extracted from emotion, the way heat is extracted from fire. If you want to understand political power, you must understand this one truth. When emotion rises, autonomy falls. The more emotional a crowd becomes, the more predictable, controllable, and obedient it grows. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever voted, supported, or defended something that you later realized you didn't fully understand? Write yes or no in the comments. Your honesty might surprise even you, because emotion doesn't push people to think. Emotion pushes people to commit. Fear commits you to protection. Anger commits you to retaliation. Hope commits you to belief. Identity commits you to tribal loyalty. And once a person commits emotionally, their mind begins rewriting reality to justify that commitment. This is the psychological trap no one notices. The mind doesn't want to admit it acted from emotion. So it creates a story. I did this because it's right. I chose this because it's smart. I supported this because it's rational. But it wasn't rational. It was emotional. And emotion always comes first. Here's how the cycle works. Emotion creates action. Action creates identity. Identity creates obedience. Once a belief becomes tied to identity, obedience becomes automatic. When people say things like, "This is who we are. This is what we stand for. We don't let them win." They are no longer speaking from thought. They are speaking from tribal instinct, because the human mind evolved for survival, not truth, and tribes ensured survival. Individuals did not. That instinct still controls modern politics, no matter how civilized the world pretends to be. When you belong to a tribe, your brain changes the rules. Loyalty becomes more important than facts. Agreement becomes more important than truth. Repetition becomes more important than accuracy. This is obedience wrapped in identity. And it is nearly impossible for people to break it on their own. But here is the darker mechanism. Obedience does not feel like obedience. It feels like belonging. It feels like pride. It feels like purpose. A person obeying their tribe doesn't feel controlled. They feel righteous. This is the genius of emotional politics. Control hides inside purpose. Obedience hides inside identity. Manipulation hides inside meaning. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote that leaders should never try to force people. Forced obedience builds resentment. Emotional obedience builds loyalty. If you want someone to obey, make them believe it was their idea. That is the essence of modern political strategy. Not force, not argument, not truth, but emotional engineering. Now consider this. Why do political movements create slogans? Why do they repeat phrases constantly? Why do they reduce complex ideas into simple emotional messages? It's not because voters are stupid. It's because voters are emotional. And emotion feeds on simplicity. A 5-word slogan can move millions because it bypasses thought and activates instinct. If a message makes you feel understood, you will follow it. If it makes you feel threatened, you will defend it. If it makes you feel hopeful, you will fight for it. People rarely obey leaders. They obey the emotions those leaders activate. Ask yourself honestly, when you look at political conflict today, do you see reason? Or do you see emotion fighting emotion? People don't debate facts. They defend identities. They don't argue ideas. They argue feelings wrapped in ideas. And here's the part that unsettles most people when they finally accept it. Once emotion shapes identity, the truth no longer matters. You can show evidence. You can show logic. You can show contradictions. It won't change anything. Not because people are incapable of understanding, but because the emotional bond is stronger than the intellectual one. The emotional voter is not trying to discover truth. The emotional voter is trying to confirm identity. And identity will always overpower information. This is obedience born through emotion. A quiet, invisible chain stronger than any force. But here's the part that affects you personally. Someone out there already knows which emotion controls you. Someone already knows what message would move you. Someone already knows what fear can mobilize you and what hope can silence your doubt. And they use that knowledge. So let me ask you again, because your answer matters more now. What emotion controls you the most? Fear, hope, anger, identity? Comment it below. Your awareness of it may be the only thing that protects you from becoming someone else's weapon. If Section 3 revealed why emotional voters obey, this section reveals how the powerful design that obedience with precision, with strategy, with intent, because emotional voters don't appear naturally. They are sculpted. Their fear is sharpened. Their anger is directed. Their hope is inflated. Their identity is weaponized. And the ones who sculpt them do it quietly. You've probably wondered before, how do politicians with weak logic still win? How do leaders with no vision still gather massive crowds? How do obvious lies still shape public belief? The answer is simple. They don't compete on truth. They compete on emotion. And emotion always wins. This is the strategy Machiavelli wrote about centuries ago. A strategy so powerful that modern political operatives use it exactly as he described. Let's break it apart. First, understand this. Every successful political movement begins with an engineered enemy, not a random opponent. A designed villain crafted to absorb the crowd's fear and anger. When a crowd is afraid of something, they're chaotic. But when a crowd is afraid of someone, they become organized. This is why modern political messaging almost always begins with blame. You're being betrayed. They're taking what's yours. They're destroying your future. They're against people like you. These messages don't inform. They ignite. The powerful choose the villain carefully, never too abstract, never too distant, never too complicated. The villain must be emotionally satisfying. Someone the crowd can point to and say, that one. That's the reason I feel this way. A human punching bag for collective emotion. But here's the darker part. Once the powerful define the enemy, They then define themselves as the protector, not through policy. Through emotional positioning, they use the same three-step formula. In almost every political cycle, identify the fear, amplify, it present themselves as the shield. It's simple and devastatingly effective. Because fear teaches obedience faster than logic ever could. But fear is only one ingredient. The second strategy is narrative, manipulation. Narrative is the thread that ties emotions together. Without a strong narrative, emotions scatter. With the right narrative, emotions align. Listen to modern political speeches closely. You will notice something strange. Almost all of them follow the same emotional blueprint. A moment of pain, a moment of hope, a promise of transformation, a warning of danger, a reminder of identity. This pattern is not random. It is engineered to move emotion in a controlled rhythm. Because if you can control the rhythm of emotion, you control the direction of the crowd. Then comes the third strategy, symbolic positioning. People think symbols are superficial. They're not. They are psychological weapons. A color, a slogan, a gesture, a phrase. These symbols become containers for emotion. They allow millions of people to feel the same thing at the same time without coordination. A slogan compresses fear into a seer. Chant. A gesture compresses identity into a signal. A symbol compresses loyalty into obedience. When you see thousands of people shouting the same phrase, they're not expressing ideas. They're reinforcing emotional belonging. And once a crowd feels belonging, obedience becomes effortless. But the most powerful strategy, the one Machiavelli understood most clearly, is controlled scarcity of clarity. The powerful never give full answers. Full answers invite scrutiny. Scrutiny activates logic. Logic breaks emotional control. So the powerful give just enough information to feel honest, but never enough to disrupt emotion. They speak in incomplete promises, vague warnings, soft outlines, implied threats, symbolic gestures. The vagueness is not a flaw. It is a tool, because ambiguity forces the emotional voter to fill in the blanks with their own desires, their own fears, their own fantasies. And nothing is more powerful than a belief people create themselves. Finally, we reach the last strategy, the one almost no citizen sees. Emotional timing. The powerful choose the perfect moment to trigger fear or hope or outrage. Not too early, not too late. Emotion must peak at the exact moment it will produce obedience. This is why scandals leak when they do, why speeches happen when they do, why promises are made when they do. Timing controls reaction. Reaction controls turnout. Turnout controls power. Now ask yourself something honestly. Who benefits when you react emotionally? Who benefits when you get angry? Who benefits when you get hopeful? Who benefits when you get afraid? Someone does. Always. Comment below what you think. Your answer reveals whether you see the strategy or still believe the story. Because here is the truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Emotional voters are not accidents of democracy. They are the engine of democracy. They are the weapons. They are the raw material from which power is built. And the powerful have perfected the art of turning emotion into influence. Here's the final mechanism, the culmination of the emotional voter. The reason they become the perfect political weapon. It is not emotion alone that gives the powerful control. It is the illusion wrapped around emotion. The perception the crowd believes is reality. Perception is the currency of modern power. Not truth, not logic, not achievement. Perception. Because the crowd does not respond to what is. The crowd responds to what feels true. Let me ask you something you've probably never been asked directly. Do you trust what feels right? Or what is right? Answer it in the comments, because the difference defines everything. Perception allows the powerful to build worlds that millions walk into without noticing the door was never locked. Here's the part most people never learn. The powerful never need to change reality. They only need to change how you interpret it. If they shift your interpretation, your reaction shifts, your choices shift, your loyalties shift, your identity shifts. This is the leverage of perception, the invisible hand behind every political transformation. And it works through 5 silent techniques. The first, selective framing. The powerful don't show you the whole picture. They show you the slice of the picture that activates the emotion they desire. Fear requires danger. Hope requires progress. Anger requires injustice. Identity requires contrast. So they crop reality like a photographer framing a shot, removing everything that doesn't fit the emotion. They want you to feel. When the frame changes, the meaning changes. And when the meaning changes, the voter changes. The second technique, repetition. Emotion responds to repetition far faster than fact. A repeated message becomes familiar. Familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes belief. Politicians understand this instinctively. Say it once, people hear it. Say it 100 times, people believe it. Say it 1,000 times, people defend it. Repetition turns perception into identity. The third technique, association. The powerful attach emotions to symbols, names, and phrases. If they want you to fear something, they make it the symbol of danger. If they want you to love something, they make it the symbol of hope. If they want you to identify with something, they make it reflect your values. This is why branding exists in politics. It is not aesthetic. It is psychological. People don't vote for individuals. They vote for the emotional meaning attached to those individuals. The fourth technique, contrast control. This one is extremely Machiavellian. Instead of improving themselves, the powerful often darken the perception of their opponents. If they make the alternative look worse, they don't need to look good. Fear of the alternative is often stronger than belief in the leader. People rarely choose the best option. They choose the least frightening one. Contrast shapes obedience. The fifth technique, density of illusion. This is the final layer. The powerful create so many overlapping narratives that the crowd loses the ability to separate truth from strategy. Confusion weakens logic. Emotion fills the gaps. And emotion is predictable. When people say, "I don't know what to believe anymore," they have already surrendered to perception warfare. But here's the twist. The powerful don't need everyone to believe the same thing. They just need everyone to feel controlled emotions. Fear is fear, even if the reasons differ. Anger is anger, even if the targets vary. Hope is hope, even if the promises contradict. Emotion is the equalizer. Perception is the amplifier. And emotional voters become the perfect weapons because they spread these perceptions without realizing they were designed. Think about the last heated political argument you witnessed. 2 people didn't clash because of facts. They clashed because their perceptions were sculpted differently. The powerful never entered the conversation, but their fingerprints were everywhere. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever argued passionately about something you didn't fully understand, simply because it felt true? If yes, comment yes. You're not alone. Millions do the same every day. That's the beauty of this system. The powerful don't need to control minds. They only need to control perceptions. And perception controls everything else. But here's the darker truth. Perception eventually becomes identity. And once identity hardens, a person becomes immovable, unreachable, predictable, the perfect weapon. A soldier who doesn't know he's a soldier. A follower who believes he's a leader. An obedient voter who believes he's independent. This is the endgame of emotional control. Not obedience alone, but self-justified obedience. And the moment you understand this, something inside you changes forever. You stop absorbing narratives. You start questioning frames. You stop reacting emotionally. You start observing patterns. You stop being led. You start watching who is leading. And in that moment, you stop being a weapon in someone else's war. You become a thinker in a world of reactors, a strategist in a world of instruments, a watcher in a world of the watched. Most people never reach this stage. But if you're still here, you already have. You have just walked through a world most people never enter. A world where emotion is currency, where perception is a weapon, where obedience is engineered long before the crowd ever realizes it is obeying. Most people live their entire lives inside the illusion of choice, inside the belief that their reactions are their own, inside the comfortable dream that their decisions spring from truth instead of design. But not you. Not anymore. You've seen the machinery that hides behind speeches and promises. You've seen how fear becomes a leash, how hope becomes a chain, how identity becomes a cage painted in the colors of freedom. And now you face a choice far heavier than a vote or an opinion. Do you return to the illusion because it is easier? Or do you continue walking into the silence where the real architecture of power lives? Most people will choose comfort. Most people will close this video and step back into the world designed for them. But if you are still here, you are not most people. You are part of the few who see the threads. The few who understand that awareness is a kind of weapon. Not loud, not violent, but sharp enough to cut through every illusion society feeds the crowd. If that clarity matters to you, then stay close. Subscribe not for entertainment, but for strength, for insight, for the quiet advantage that comes from understanding the psychology that moves nations while the crowd sleeps through it. This channel is not a stage. It is a refuge, a place for thinkers, observers, uncomfortable minds who refuse to be controlled by emotion, by illusion, or by the storytellers of power. If you're ready to keep seeing deeper, walk with us. The next truth waits in the shadows.